The night everything changed, I was not wearing a suit or holding a gun. I was standing in my mother's old kitchen, watching rain crawl down the cracked window, wondering when exactly my life had turned into something people whispered about. She wasn't there anymore, of course. The apartment was empty, smelling like dust and forgotten prayers. But in my head I could still hear her voice, soft and tired, asking if I'd eaten, if I was warm, if I was safe. 3 things I almost never was as a kid. Back then, power meant the landlord's heavy steps in the hallway and my father's shouting through thin walls. It meant hiding my little sister under the bed while plates broke in the next room. I learned early that the world only respects 2 things, money and fear. What nobody tells you is that there's a third thing, quieter but stronger: love. The kind that makes a boy step between his mother and a drunk man twice his size. Years later, people would call me Hefe with nervous eyes, their hands slightly shaking as they poured my drink. They only saw the suits, the cars, the men at the doors. They saw the guns. They never saw that scared boy again. They never believed he was still there. That night the city was wet and nervous. Rain had turned the streets into black glass, reflecting lights from bars, from broken traffic lights, from the cheap neon sign above my club, ELPUERTO. To most people it looked like any other late-night place. Music, alcohol, bodies moving in the dark. But everyone who mattered knew this was where you came if you needed something done that the law would never do for you. I was upstairs in my office, away from the noise. A half-empty glass of whiskey rested on my desk, next to a photograph of my mother holding a baby with my eyes, my sister. I turned the frame face down whenever I did business. That night the frame was still upright, like I'd forgotten I was a dangerous man. The clock on the wall ticked louder than the music below. Leo was late. Leo was never late. He wasn't just my assistant. He was the first kid I had ever pulled off the street instead of turning away. 17 when I found him, shivering behind the club with a knife too big for his skinny hand. I remember the way he'd looked at me that night, like he was ready to die if it meant not going back to whatever hell he'd come from. I didn't kill him. I gave him a hot meal, a clean shirt, a job making sure nobody touched the cars parked outside. Years later, he knew my schedules better than I did, knew which bottle of whiskey I reached for when I was angry, which song my mother used to hum when I couldn't sleep. In a world built on fear, Leo was proof that I still had something human left in me. And now he was late. Raul, my right hand, stood by the window, smoking, watching the street below. He was older than me, born into the game, with eyes that had seen too many men die slowly. Traffic, he muttered, not looking at me. It's raining, relax, Hefe. Relax, people used that word with me a lot, like they didn't understand that my whole life had been built on never, ever relaxing. I checked my watch again, 23 minutes late. Leo once called me from a hospital waiting room when his stomach was bleeding from an ulcer, just to say he'd be exactly 9 minutes late. So where the hell was he now? My phone buzzed, a message from a number I knew too well. Morales. Nice night for accidents, hermano, stay safe. My fingers tightened around the phone until my knuckles went white. Morales, my rival, my shadow, the man who'd grown up 3 streets away from me and chosen a different god to worship, chaos. We had rules in my world: you don't touch kids, you don't touch old people, you don't touch the innocent who stay out of the business. Morales had no such lines. That morning he'd sent me an offer, move product through my port for him, no questions asked, no inspections. In exchange, he'd leave my streets quiet. I told him no, quietly, firmly. I told him we don't move poison that turns children into ghosts before they're even men. He laughed through the phone, said the city doesn't have space for saints, only for kings and corpses. Then he hung up. Now he was texting me about accidents. My heart started to beat harder, not faster, just heavier, like each beat was a warning sign. Raul watched my face carefully. He stubbed out his cigarette, his jaw tightening. What did he say? He asked. Nothing, I lied. Stupid joke. Because admitting fear in front of your men is like dropping blood into the ocean. Sharks appear. Respect turns to doubt. Doubt turns to disobedience. In our world, you can't protect anyone if they think you're weak. Still, my eyes drifted to the street below. From the 3rd floor window, I could see the main road. Cars sliding by slowly in the rain. Headlights tearing through the darkness in blurred lines. The sidewalk in front of ELPUERTO glowed slick and empty. No Leo, standing with his hands in his pockets, making jokes with the doorman like usual. I grabbed my coat. I'm going down, I said. Raul frowned. For what? He'll show. He's never this late. There was something in my voice that ended the conversation. Raul nodded once quietly and followed me out the office. We walked down the narrow stairs, the bass from the music below vibrating up through the walls. Laughter, clinking glasses, the sharp smell of cheap perfume and spilled beer. To everyone down there, the night was alive and ordinary. To me, it felt like the air before a gunshot. We pushed through the crowd, men stepping aside without needing to look. You learn to recognize a man by the way the room changes when he enters. Conversations fell half a tone lower, shoulders tensed, eyes avoided mine. Fear, respect, both felt the same from the outside. Victor, the doorman, straightened when he saw me. He wiped rain from his forehead with the back of his hand. "Jefe," he said, his voice a little too loud. "Everything okay?" "Leo," I asked. He shook his head. "Haven't seen him since this afternoon." A drop of water slid down his temple. He didn't wipe it. Said he was going to pick up some papers from the warehouse. That's it. Something cold moved through my stomach. The warehouse was on the other side of Morale's territory. Leo knew better than to take the long way home there, unless he had no choice, unless someone made sure he had no choice. I stepped outside under the thin awning. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the streets still shone like they'd been polished with oil. Cars hissed by, tires carving soft noises in the wet. In the distance, a siren wailed, too far to matter. Then, all at once, the ordinary sounds of the city were cut in half by a single, sharp scream. It came from the corner, maybe 20 meters away, where the sidewalk curved around the block. There was the high-pitched squeal of brakes, rubber burning against asphalt, then the heavy, sickening thud of metal against flesh. For a second, nobody moved. The music from inside the club kept playing, stupid and cheerful. The neon sign buzzed softly above me. Then Victor whispered, "Madre de Dios," and started running. I ran after him. Raul was already ahead of me, pushing through the few people who had turned toward the sound. My shoes splashed through shallow puddles, cold water soaking my socks, but I didn't feel it. The only thing I felt was a thin, rising panic that tasted like old memories of my father's fist, of my sister's breath stopping in the night when her lungs failed, of every time I had been too late. We turned the corner. There, under the yellow wash of a flickering street lamp, a dark car was speeding away, its taillights shrinking into the rain. On the ground, twisted in an unnatural angle beside a broken motorcycle, lay a body in a dark jacket I knew too well. Leo. The world narrowed until there was only the sound of my own breathing and the echo of the now distant engine. I ran to him, dropping to my knees on the wet pavement. His face was pale, slick with rain and blood mixed together. One of his legs was bent wrong, and his hands, those clumsy, loyal hands, were trying and failing to push himself up. "Stay down, Leo," I said, my voice breaking somewhere between an order and a prayer. "Don't move, don't you dare move." He tried to laugh, but it came out as a choking cough. Red bubbled at the corner of his mouth. "Jefe," he whispered, "sorry I'm late." Something tore in my chest. I pressed my hand against his side where the blood was spreading fast, warm and sticky between my fingers. Behind me I heard Raul barking orders, "Call an ambulance, get the car, block the street," but all I could focus on was the way Leo's eyes were fighting to stay open. "I saw the license plate," he gasped, each word an effort. "Black car, tinted windows, Morale's boys, they waited for me by the warehouse. I thought I could lose them." His fingers curled weakly into my sleeve, clinging. He was shaking, whether from pain or fear I couldn't tell, maybe both, maybe he was just cold. "They didn't want the shipment, Jefe," he whispered. "They wanted you to see you hurt." My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. The rain felt louder now, cruel, like the sky was clapping slowly over our heads. Morales hadn't just sent a message. He'd sent it straight through Leo's body and into my hands. I looked at the boy I had pulled off the streets, the boy who'd brought me coffee every morning exactly how I liked it, who answered my calls no matter the hour, who once stood in front of a gun for me without thinking. I felt something old and dark rising in me, the part of me that had made men disappear for far less than this. But under that darkness was something else. The memory of my mother's hands, small and rough, patching up my split lip when I was 10, whispering, "Promise me, Hijo, you will never become like the men who hurt us. If you ever have power, use it to protect, not destroy." My whole life since then had been a war between that promise and the world I'd chosen. Tonight, that war reached its breaking point on a wet sidewalk under a dying street lamp. Leo's grip on my sleeve loosened. His eyes rolled slightly, fighting the pull of unconsciousness. Sirens were closer now. Voices shouted around us, but they were blurry, distant. For me, there was only him. Don't do anything stupid, he murmured, almost too quiet to hear. Don't become them for me. Even now, bleeding, broken, he was trying to protect me from myself. I swallowed hard, feeling the taste of metal on my tongue, and looked up. My men were all watching me, waiting, some with anger in their eyes, ready for war, some with fear. Victor stood back, shaking, a phone in his hand, still connected to emergency services. Rawls' jaw was set like stone, his fingers twitching near the gun at his waist. Everyone knew what should happen next. In our world, blood calls for blood, an answer calls for an echo. Morales had crossed a line, and there was only one language he respected. I felt all their expectations pressing on me like a physical weight. Give the word, Jefe, we'll burn his world down. I looked back at Leo, at the boy dying in my arms because I had chosen to say no to poison and yes to some small piece of my mother's voice. My throat burned. In that moment I understood that whatever I ordered next would not just decide what happened to Morales. It would decide what kind of man I truly was. The boy in the kitchen or the monster in the whispers. Maybe both, maybe something in between. Rawl leaned closer. Say it, he urged, his voice low. Tell us what to do. The sirens were almost on top of us now. Red and blue lights began to paint the wet walls around us. My men shifted, tense, ready. The whole street seemed to hold its breath. I took one long, shaking breath, my hand still pressed to Leo's wound, feeling his life slip through my fingers. My vision blurred for a second, then sharpened with a strange, painful clarity. I knew exactly what I had to order. I lifted my head, met Rawls' eyes, and opened my mouth to give the command that would shock every man standing on that street, including myself. Everyone stands down, I said, and my own voice surprised me. It sounded calm, almost gentle. Nobody touches Morales, not tonight. For a second the street didn't understand. Rawls stared at me like he'd misheard. Victor froze with his phone in his hand. A couple of the younger guys, the ones who still thought violence solved everything, shifted their weight, glancing at each other, waiting for a different order. I pressed harder on Leo's wound. He groaned, his fingers twitching against my sleeve. The sirens screamed closer. I could already see the first reflection of red-blue lights sliding along the wet walls. Jefe, Rawl leaned closer, rain dripping from his eyebrows. You can't be serious. He ran over our boy in front of your club if we don't answer. We answer, I cut him off, but we answer on our terms. First we keep our own alive. That word, our own, hung there. It wasn't about product or streets or money. It was about the kid bleeding into my hands. I looked up, locking eyes with every man within reach. Hide the guns. Now, inside under the bar, behind the ice machine, I don't care. When the ambulance gets here, I want no weapons in sight. Nobody runs, nobody fires, nobody even raises their voice. You show your hands, you keep your eyes down, and you let these people work. Victor blinked, but the police. We'll see what I want them to see, I snapped. Then softer, if Leo dies because one of you scares the medic with a gun, I swear to God I will bury you myself. Fear flashed across faces that had seen men shot without blinking. Not fear of the law, fear of disappointing me, fear of crossing a line they didn't know I still had. Rawl hesitated. The part of him made by this life twitched toward war, toward blood. But he'd been with me long enough to recognize that when I spoke like this, I was already halfway past the point of no return. Slowly, he nodded. You heard him, he growled at the others. Move. Men scattered, disappearing into the club, shoving pistols into hidden drawers, behind speakers, under trash bags. The street suddenly looked almost normal. Just a wet corner, a broken motorcycle, a bleeding boy, and a man on his knees holding him together. The ambulance screeched around the corner, tires spitting water. It stopped so close I felt the spray on my back. Two paramedics jumped out, a woman and a man, both young, both with that tired, sharp look of people who have already seen too much. They froze for half a heartbeat when they saw me, the suits, the faces, the way everyone stood just a little too straight. I saw the moment recognition flickered in their eyes. ELPUERTO, the Jefe, the stories people told. I lifted my hands from Leo's side, palms red and shining in the light. Help him, I said, and there was no command in it this time, only plea. They moved, kneeling, cutting his shirt, talking in quick code words that meant nothing to me and everything to them. Blood, pressure, oxygen. A mask slipped over Leo's mouth. His eyes rolled, his chest heaved. Stay with me, kid, I whispered. You still owe me a coffee tomorrow. He didn't answer. Behind the ambulance, another car pulled up. Black and white. Police. Two uniforms stepped out, hands hovering near their holsters as they took in the scene. My men on the sidewalk, the broken motorcycle, the bleeding boy, the neon sign above us humming like a bad joke. One of them was new, I could tell by the stiffness in his shoulders. The other was not. Broad shoulders, grey starting at his temples, eyes like he'd seen the bottom of every bottle and still somehow come up for air. Of course, I muttered under my breath, Martinez. We'd grown up in the same streets. I'd gone one way, he'd gone the other. The city loved its little ironies. He walked toward me slowly, boots splashing in the puddles, his partner a step behind. His gaze flicked to my hands, slick with Leo's blood, then to the men behind me, then to my face. Rough night, Jefe, he said quietly, no jokes, no smile. Accident, I answered, meeting his eyes, hit and run. We got a call about a collision, he replied. We didn't expect. He let the sentence die, but his eyes finished it. This, you, all of you. The paramedics slid Leo onto a stretcher. He moaned once, a broken, animal sound that made my jaw clench. They started to wheel him toward the ambulance. One of them glanced at me, uncertain. Hospital Central, the woman said. We'll do what we can. I'm going with him, I said. The younger cop stiffened. You're not. Martinez raised a hand, stopping him. His eyes never left mine. There was history in them, old sirens, old nights, old choices. He knew exactly what it meant for me to step into that ambulance in front of his squad car, with hands still bloody, no lawyers, no distance. You sure that's a good idea? He asked quietly. Hospitals are full of cameras and witnesses. I thought of my mother's promise, of Leo's whisper, don't become them for me. I'm not leaving him, I said, not this time. The words slipped out before I could catch them. Not this time. Not like my sister, coughing to death in a cheap clinic while I hid outside because my father said, men don't cry in front of doctors. Something softened, just for a flash, in Martinez's face. The rain tapped steadily on the hood of his car. Somewhere inside the club, the music had finally stopped. The whole neighborhood felt like it was listening. He sighed, fine, you ride with him. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. But understand something, Hermano, if anything happens in that hospital, guns, fights, threats, I will put you in cuffs myself. No deals, no warnings. I nodded once. Nothing's going to happen, not from me. Behind us, my men shifted, uneasy. This was not how bosses behaved. Bosses stayed in shadows, gave orders from safe rooms, sent others to bleed in their place. I turned to Raul. You're in charge here. He stiffened, surprised. Jefe. You heard me. I stepped closer, my voice cold enough to freeze the rain. You keep everyone calm. Nobody moves on morals. Not one bullet, not one blown tire, not one broken window. He wants us to go wild so the cops can clean us off the map in one night. We're not giving him that. And if he thinks we're weak, one of the younger guys blurted, then shrank when I looked at him. Then he's not as smart as I thought, I said. Weak men lose control. Tonight we hold it. I squeezed Raul's shoulder, feeling his tension under my fingers. You want to help me, protect the streets, protect the business, most of all protect each other. We don't bury two people for the price of one message. Raul swallowed, then nodded. There was fear in his eyes and something else, respect, but of a different kind than usual. Not the respect you give a wolf, the kind you give a man who walks into a fire alone. I turned back to the ambulance. The paramedics were already inside with Leo working fast, shouting codes. I climbed in, the metal floor slick under my shoes. As the doors started to close, I caught one last glimpse of my world from the inside out. The club glowing sickly in the rain, my men huddled under the awning, police lights washing everything in red and blue, like a crime scene and a confession at the same time. The doors slammed shut with a hollow bang, the siren wailed to life. The ambulance shot forward, throwing me slightly off balance. I grabbed a metal bar, my other hand still sticky with Leo's blood. Somewhere behind us, in the rain-soaked streets I had spent a lifetime learning to control, Morales waited for his war. He had no idea that the only order I'd given was to save a life instead of taking one. And as the city blurred past the ambulance windows, for the first time in years, I realized I might have just broken the one rule that kept men like me alive. The hospital smelled like bleach and fear, the sharp, restless kind that sticks to your clothes and follows you home. Fluorescent lights washed the color out of everything, the walls, the nurses, the blood drying on my shirt. In that white corridor without shadows or smoke, the suit felt like a costume. Under it, I was just a man with shaking hands and someone else's life on them. They rushed Leo through double doors, a nurse shouting numbers I didn't understand. I tried to follow, but a small woman in blue scrubs held up a hand, stopping me with more force than her body should have had. "You wait here," she said. Her accent curled around the words like mine used to before I learned to hide it. "You don't go past this line." "He's my—" I stopped. "What was he? Employee, family, shadow?" "He's my boy," I finished quietly. She looked at me properly then. At the expensive watch, the bloody cuffs, the ruined shoes. I saw recognition first, then judgment, then something like disappointment. "You can wait," she repeated, "or you can leave, but you don't get in their way." I nodded and stepped back. Humility is easy to preach, hard to practice when your whole life has been built on doors opening the moment you raise a finger. This door didn't care who I was. It only cared whether the boy on that stretcher still had a pulse. The doors swung shut between us. For the first time in a long time, I had nowhere to go and nothing to order. Just a plastic chair against a pale wall and a clock ticking too loud above my head. I sat down slowly. My knees felt older than the rest of me. Memories crowded in uninvited. Another hospital, another cheap chair, my mother's hands twisting the strap of her bag until the leather cut into her fingers. My sister on a bed too big for her, an oxygen mask covering half her face. The doctor's voice cool and professional as he said words like chronic and terminal, and we did everything we could. We both knew they hadn't. We both knew everything would have cost more money than my father ever brought home. Money he spent at bars while my mother sold her jewelry one tiny piece at a time. That day I made two promises, that I would never again be poor enough to lose someone because of a bill, and that if I ever had power, no one under my roof would die alone. The first promise had turned me into the man the city feared. The second had brought me here, in a blood-stained shirt, waiting outside an operating room like any other desperate relative. My phone buzzed in my pocket, dragging me back to the present. "Roll," I answered without hello. "Talk." "We found the bike," he said. No surprise there, but the car. I could hear street noise behind him, the low murmur of my men pretending to relax. "They dumped it in the canal, burned, plates melted." "Professional," I muttered. "That's not the part you should worry about." His voice dropped lower. "Leo's route to the warehouse. Only 3 people knew it today, me, you, and whoever sent him to pick up those papers." "I sent him," I said, "this morning." "Yes, but only after I told him where Morale's boys were last seen. I told him to avoid that side of the river. He was supposed to take the upper bridge, not pass anywhere near their territory." The clock on the wall ticked louder, so how did they know where he'd be? "That's the question," Rawl said. "Either they got lucky or we have a leak." The word settled heavy in my stomach. A leak, a traitor, the kind of rot that doesn't just crack your walls, it poisons your foundation. "Who was on shift when Leo left?" I asked. "Victor at the door, the bartenders, a couple of the new boys in the back. I'm talking to everyone." He hesitated. "You think Morales has someone on our payroll?" "In this city," I said, "he probably has someone in my bathroom." Rawl let out a humorless breath. "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing loud," I said. "Not yet, no threats, no beatings. You talk soft, you listen harder. Tomorrow morning we feed different people different lies about a fake shipment. 3 routes, 3 stories. We see which one ends up waiting for us with guns." "And tonight?" "Tonight we wait," I said, hating the word. "Keep the boys close to home. No one drinks, no one disappears, no one plays hero. If Morales wants a show, he'll have to perform it alone." I hung up before he could argue, because I was one argument away from saying yes to a war I couldn't control. The clock ticked. Nurses walked by with clipboards and tired eyes, avoiding looking at me for too long. One older man across the hall watched me openly, his face drawn with curiosity and fear. To him, I was probably a story his grandchildren whispered when they passed my club on the way to school. A tall man in a white coat emerged from behind the double doors, pulling off his surgical cap. His hair was more grey than black, his face lined in all the places where other people kept their secrets. His name tag read, Dr. Arias. He scanned the corridor, then walked straight toward me. "You're with the young man from the accident?" he asked. His tone was neutral, but his eyes were not. They had that same mix I'd seen all night, recognition, judgment, something like tired anger. "Yes," I said, standing up. "How is he?" We've stopped the internal bleeding for now. He glanced at my hands, then back to my face. His leg is badly broken, multiple fractures, a concussion, 2 ribs. He lost a lot of blood. But he's alive. For the moment, Arya's jaw tightened. The next 24 hours will decide whether he stays that way. I reached inside my jacket. He stiffened, just a fraction, like he wasn't sure if I was about to pull out a gun or a roll of cash. I surprised him. I pulled out nothing, just my empty hands. Whatever he needs, I said quietly. Specialists, machines, blood, I don't care about the cost. He stared at me for a long beat. You really think money is the problem here? Isn't it always? I asked. The ghost of something, maybe disgust, maybe sorrow, crossed his face. In this hospital the problem is time, and choices, whose bed we give to whom, which surgery we do first, who gets the last unit of type O blood when 3 people need it. I studied him, so who doesn't get it tonight because of us? He held my gaze, and for a second I thought he might lie, then his shoulders dropped a little. An old woman with lung cancer, stage 4, it would buy her maybe 3 days, 5 at most. She told us at shift change to give her place to whoever comes in younger. My throat tightened. The city, in its own cruel way, had made another choice for me. A stranger had stepped aside for my boy without knowing his name or mine or what came with both. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it more than I expected. Arias blinked, surprised. Men like you don't usually say that in my hallway. Men like me say a lot of things in your hallway, I answered, just not out loud. His lips twitched, almost a smile, then flattened again. You can see him in a few minutes. He's sedated. If there are problems outside with the police. His eyes flicked toward the end of the corridor where Martinez stood pretending not to listen. That's not my business. My business is that if you scare my staff, if I see one gun, if anyone raises a hand in this building, I throw you out myself. I don't care how many stories they tell about you in the street. That won't be necessary, I said. We're not here to make trouble. I looked at the door behind him. Not this time. He studied me one last second, then nodded shortly and walked away. My phone buzzed again, not Raul this time. A number I didn't recognize, no name. I almost ignored it. Then I remembered Morale's text from earlier, and something cold brushed my spine. I answered. Busy night, Hermano. The voice on the other end was smooth, amused. Morale's, of course. I walked down the corridor, away from nurses, away from Martinez's curious gaze, until I reached a small alcove with a vending machine humming softly. You're calling hospitals now, I said. You planning to send flowers? He laughed. Already did. Check the front desk. I could picture him, feet up on some expensive table, smoke curling from a cigar, smile lazy and mean. You're crossing lines, Morales, I said. You hit one of my boys in my street. I offered you a partnership, he replied. You offered me a sermon about poison and children and honor. What did you expect, that I'd clap? You want territory, money, respect. You don't touch my people to get it. That's where you're wrong, Jefe, he said softly. Your people are the only thing you care about. You can lose product, you can lose cash, you can lose face, but hurt one of your little dogs and the big dog howls no. My hand tightened around the phone. If you wanted me to howl, you picked the wrong night. I'm sitting in a hospital hallway while surgeons stitch up a boy who took a hit meant for my heart. I'm not howling, Morales, I'm listening. Listening to what? He asked, truly curious. To who helped you find him? There was a half-second pause, too short for guilt, just long enough for interest. You think you have a rat? In this city, I said, everyone has a rat. The question is where it's been eating. He chuckled, then maybe tonight is a blessing. You lose a dog, you find a rat, 2 for 1. I closed my eyes briefly, fighting the image his words made. He's not dead. Not yet, Morales said, but even if he lives, you know this changes you. Men like us, we're clay until something breaks us. Then we harden. You were always too soft for this world, Hermano. Maybe I just did you a favor. You call this a favor again, I said quietly, and I will forget every rule I ever wrote for myself. And there he is, he said, satisfied. The man I know, the one who doesn't kneel in hospitals or apologize to doctors. Call me when you're ready to be him again. My offer still stands. Move my product and this, his voice dropped, almost tender, doesn't happen to anyone else you love. The line went dead. For a few seconds, all I could hear was the hum of the vending machine and my own pulse in my ears. Then a different sound cut through, footsteps that were both too light and too steady to be a cop or a nurse. I opened my eyes. A man in a maintenance uniform was pushing a cart slowly down the empty side corridor. Blue overalls, hospital logo, cap pulled low. He moved like he belonged there, easy and unhurried, but something in his gait was wrong, too balanced, too quiet. And no tools on the cart, just a black duffel bag. He passed the ICU door without looking at it. That was the second mistake. Anyone who actually worked here would have glanced in just by habit to see who was dying today. The third mistake was the bulge at his ankle that only a man like me would see, a small gun poorly hidden. Without thinking, I stepped away from the wall and started walking toward him. "Friend," I called softly, "you missed a spot back there." He froze for a millisecond, then turned, smile already in place, eyes empty. "Sorry, sir, just doing my." I closed the distance before he could finish. One hand grabbed his collar, the other slammed the cart sideways into the wall. The duffel bag bounced, something hard thudding inside. His smile broke. "Careful," he hissed, "you'll break the medical supplies." "That what we're calling bullets now?" I asked. His eyes darted down the hallway. It was empty. I'd chosen this corner on purpose when I walked away from everyone to talk. No witnesses, no heroes. "Wrong hospital, amigo," I said quietly. "Morales doesn't own this one." In one fast motion, he went for his ankle. I was faster. Years of surviving people like him had taught me exactly how long that reach took. My fist connected with his wrist, sending the small pistol skittering across the tiles. It stopped against the base of the vending machine with a hollow clack. He tried to twist away. I shoved him hard against the wall, forearm pressed into his throat. His cap fell off, revealing a young face, maybe 25, eyes hard but not yet used to regret. "You were going to walk past that door," I nodded toward the ICU. "Go 3 more steps, turn left into the stairwell and wait for someone to tell you which room to visit. Or you were going to visit all of them just to be safe. Which was it?" He tried to stay silent. It lasted 2 seconds. I increased the pressure just enough to make his skin redden. "I don't know what you're talking about," he croaked. "Look at me," I said, "really look." His gaze flicked to my face, and I watched recognition dawn. The stories, the rumors, the whispered warnings, don't lie to him when he's already angry. "I just clean," he tried again, weaker. "You're about to clean the wrong mess," I said. "Whose orders?" He swallowed, throat pushing against my arm. Sweat broke along his hairline. I can't say his name." "You think he'll find you in here?" I asked. "Because if I let you go, you walk out that door owing him a job you didn't finish." I leaned closer, letting the truth cut through the threat. "Men like him don't forgive failure. Men like me at least give you a chance to choose how you die." Something in his eyes cracked at that. His shoulders sagged just a little. The false maintenance badge on his chest glinted under the fluorescent light. "He has someone with you," he rasped. "Someone who tells him when you move, when your boys move, where they sleep, where they park." "Names," I said. "Start with those." "I don't know," he insisted, panic bleeding into his words now. "I just get times, places, I swear. The assistant leaves at 1900 alone, Route 3. That's all, no faces, no names." I believed him. A man like Morales wouldn't give full pieces to the bottom of the ladder. But even that small detail confirmed everything Rawl had feared. Someone close had described Leo's routine like they were reading off a schedule. "Why the hospital?" I asked. His eyes flicked involuntarily toward the ICU again. He said, "If the boy lives, you stay soft. If he dies," he hesitated, "you go crazy. Either way, he wins. Either he sends you a second message or he removes the thing that makes you dangerous." "The thing that makes me dangerous," I repeated. "Your heart," he said, voice barely audible, his words not mine. I stared at him, feeling something burn slow and deep in my chest. Morales thought my heart was a weakness. He had no idea it was the only reason I was still standing. Behind me, footsteps echoed, heavy, measured. I released the man just enough to turn my head. Martinez stood at the end of the corridor, one hand on his belt, eyes on me, then on the gun by the vending machine, then on the fake maintenance badge. For a long 3 seconds, no one moved. I could see the calculation in his gaze. He just walked into a scene that in any other part of town would end with bodies and paperwork. And here I was, the man he'd spent his life trying not to become, holding someone else against a wall in his hospital. I did something then I wasn't sure I had the pride to do. I stepped back, hands up, palms open. "He's not ours," I said. "He's here to finish what started on my street." The young man gasped, sucking in air, rubbing his throat. I could have snapped his neck before Martinez took 3 more steps. Years ago I would have, tonight I didn't. Martinez's gaze flicked between us again. Then he moved forward in 3 quick strides, grabbed the assassin, shoved him face first against the wall, and snapped cuffs around his wrists with a swift, practiced motion. "On your knees," he ordered. The man obeyed, eyes wide, as if this was the outcome he'd never considered, that the cops might be the ones who saved him from the people who sent him. Martinez kicked the small gun away and bent to pick it up with a cloth from his pocket. Evidence, chain of custody, all the things men like him believed in. He looked at me, really looked. "You could have killed him before I got here," he said. "It wasn't a question." "I still could," I answered, "but then we'd both have more paperwork." He snorted once, then his face hardened again. "We'll see what he gives us at the station." He paused. "If he lives long enough to talk." "Men like him don't talk for free," I said. "Men like you don't usually give them the chance," he shot back. We stood there a moment, 2 sides of the same city, both dragged into a place where nothing was clean, not even the walls. The double doors at the end of the corridor swung open. Dr. Arias stepped out, his expression unreadable. His eyes went from the cuffed man on the floor to the cop to me. Something like resignation crossed his face, like the hospital itself was tired of being where our worlds collided. He walked toward me. With each step my heartbeat got heavier. This was the sound that had haunted my mother's life. The doctor's shoes on linoleum, coming closer with news that would build or break whatever was left inside her. Arias stopped in front of me, his shoulders sagging. "He's stable," he said. "For now, we managed more than I expected. He's a fighter, your boy." I closed my eyes briefly, a breath I hadn't realized I was holding escaping my chest. "He's asking for you," the doctor added. "Not with words, he's still under the drugs. But every time we touched him, he tried to turn his head toward the door, toward the hallway." "Thank you," I said quietly. Arias nodded once, then he held up something small and blood-stained between his fingers, an envelope crumpled, my name written across the front in a tight, controlled hand. "We found this in his jacket pocket," he said. "Figured you'd want it." My name, on an envelope that had been pressed against Leo's bleeding side like a second wound. I took it carefully. The paper was stiff with dried blood. The letters of my name were still legible. "Whoever sent your boy out tonight," Arias said, "sent this with him. Maybe it matters, maybe it doesn't. I've learned not to guess with men like you." He walked away, leaving me with the weight of a message carried through fire and steel. Behind me I heard the young assassin breathing hard through his nose, cuffed and kneeling. Ahead of me, through the door, Leo lay between life and death, still holding on. On either side, the law and the underworld watched, waiting to see which part of me would open that envelope, the boy from the kitchen or the boss from the streets. My fingers trembled as I slipped a thumb under the torn flap. If Morales had written what I thought he had, then everything I believed about power, protection, and the price of kindness was about to be tested in a way I'd spent my whole life trying to avoid. If this story touched you, share it, leave a comment, and remember, even in the darkest worlds, the bravest heart is the one that still chooses kindness.